GELI, which is Global Entrepreneurial Leaders
Leaders
Institute.
Institute.
Sounds like we could be singing around there. That and what else? I've had a long and happy life, and then I met my co-founder.
Thank you.
Oh, my name is Tom Kosnick. I forgot.
Hi, everybody. How's everyone doing? Oh, awesome. So before we get started, I would love you to huddle with your neighbor, say hi, who's your favorite World Cup team, talk about the weather, make friends. Yeah, please huddle and buzz for a second. Meet your neighbor. Before I get started, I want to ask you two very important questions. First of all, how many of you, by a raise of hand, would self-identify as a millennial or Generation Z? All right, that means people from 12 to 34.
Yeah, and those of you who are not millennial or Generation Z, we're going to get together and help the millennials and Generation Z, but it'll be two-way, right? As we know.
Yeah, that's why we partnered together. Sorry? Yes. Besides the social connotations and their strong characteristics, we define them by age very directly. So people from 12 to 18 tend to be called Generation Z, and from 18 to 34 are people called millennials. Cool.
Yeah, in our target market, because millennials, Gen Z are there are more of them. They're just not in the sweet spot yet. So they're right.
Yes. Cool. Okay, almost a full house of Generation Z and millennials. Move to the next question. It's a little bit touchy, feely, but how many of you, by raise of hand, would say proudly say, "I have found my passion" or "I have found my life purpose"? Oh, nice. Cool. Yeah, I'm surprised. So I'm so happy to see every one of you here. I am Annabella. I'm the founder of Global Entrepreneurial Leaders Institute, short name GELI. And with Tom Kosnick, my co-founder, we started this journey from Chengdu, Sichuan, which is the southwestern part of China, home to pandas. We started this company late April from a conference trip there. We met a group of really talented young people who serve as, they're freshmen in college to serve as interpreters and translators at the conferences, and we asked them what they're gonna do after you graduate, and every single one of them say, "I want to be a translator." And we asked them why. Is it really because you love it? And they say, "Oh, because I major in it." And this really triggered us to think more beyond that answer. So Jelly is always up for this mission to help to help global rising leaders who are millennials and Generation Z to figure out what they want to do by having more experience. So what do I mean? We want to provide them with an extra entrepreneurial experience by placing them into startups and work with the founders so that they know they can experience the entrepreneurial spirit by having some hands-on projects, by connecting with our mentors from our network, and establish some lifelong mentorship. We see this very, very important. We want to change their life. We want to broaden their horizon. We want to provide them with opportunities so that they can make a well-informed decision about their career. So move to this slide. I really want to thank Jelly's partners, and without them, we won't be able to have this panel set up. I especially want to thank the Vault, this wonderful, lovely, engaging community. I want to thank Kevin, Soya, and Jenny for helping us putting this together.
So Soya's looking the other way. Soya, at least wave or something so people know.
Yeah, Soya is the general manager here, and I want also.
We had the marketing lead there as well. Sandra, come on out.
And Sandra. Yeah.
Sandra runs marketing. Is there anybody else that we're? Is he?
This is a really closely knit community, so.
He has a very good eye for talent, as you can tell by looking at the talent that have.
Over there with the blue shirt. Come hang out with us. Thank you. All right, without further ado, I want to pass the floor to our panelists. It's a very gender balanced and geographically diverse panel.
So introduce myself, right? You basically can read here. I put two sections, official and unofficial. So officially, I'm a serial entrepreneur. I consider myself both business and social. I've done startups in both sectors. I sold my last startup at 11 million US dollar after its 2 years funding. Right now, I'm a co-founder and CEO of Wafa Games. It's a cool company. I will tell you about it later. And last year, we were recognized by MIT Tech Review as one of the global, sorry. Oh, stand over here. Oh, I'm blocking the view. Sorry. As a big size, sorry for blocking the view. So last year, we were recognized as one of the 35 innovators under 35. Thank God I'm still under 35. And I was once China's youngest national chess champion at 10, and the chess master since 13. But unofficially, which is even more important because that's a real life. That's why you get to read in the media. But it's real, but that's not the daily life you live in. The daily life I live in is I failed a lot, both publicly and privately. Yes, I saw companies, but sometimes it's paper value. And because as an entrepreneur, you took investment, sometimes you might have not so nice investors, not as nice as Tom. So investor will take most of chunk. And for the remaining, actually, you keep reinvesting into your next startup if you are entrepreneur by heart. And of course, as a CEO, you are responsible for the electricity bill. You are also in charge of running water. Make sure your front desk is happy, everyone is happy. No one, of course, asks whether you are happy or not because that's not important. You keep yourself happy. And also, creation is really hard. Where a company build on the value of innovation. It's like experiment, and most of my days ends with frustration, ends with no solutions, ends with failures. Yeah, so as a chess player, even I used to vomit before and during every game in the national, international tournaments under the stress. So those are me.
On your opponent?
Oh, I wish, but that would be against the law or against the rules. So yes, before I went into the tournament, I need to vomit every drop in my stomach. Therefore, I can play. I use my brain.
What did you tell me just a moment ago about what you do for fun now?
Yeah, so Tom earlier just asked me, oh, so what do you do fun? I said, oh, fun, that sounds so foreign to me. No, but I do have fun. And what I do fun in the private time is I play chess still until today. Yeah, before I go to sleep.
No vomiting, right? For fun?
Oh, now no more. No, now no vomiting. Finally, I can get to enjoy.
Yes.
So that's a little something about me. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I met Kathy in Chengdu. We're from the same place, from China. Very proud. It's called Chengdu. Okay, here you go, Torsten.
All right.
You have to go stand to the right of them.
I'm gonna stand over here. Is that useful? Yeah? This is not my slide, by the way, but it's really totally okay. You don't need a slide. I have 3 minutes. I'm definitely not playing chess against you, because I would fail miserably. I need a lot of drinks, I think. My name is Torsten Koland. I'm from Denmark in the name of all the geographic diversity here, so go Denmark in the World Cup. I founded a company called YouNoodle. YouNoodle, it is not a restaurant delivery service. It is a platform for entrepreneurs around the world where we work with governments and foundations and a lot of other organizations finding entrepreneurs that can solve big problems. And so as an example of that, I just got back from Puerto Rico, where after Hurricane Maria, the island is in dire need of rebuilding, not just structurally, but also in terms of new businesses. A lot of talent has left, and we are essentially helping the government of the island of Puerto Rico import startups from around the world to come to Puerto Rico and build tomorrow's business. And those are the types of projects that we do. It's all run on the platform, but we're also involved in a lot of things. So that has been really fascinating. I got here, I can hear myself, that's really amazing. I got here from Denmark 8 years ago. So it's been a while, and I've learned a ton along the way. I met Tom about 7 years ago, and Tom has been an advisor to Rebecca's and my company, which has been really cool. Thank you for that, Tom.
It has been two-way mentoring.
It's been
Learn from you guys.
absolutely. And usually I also introduce myself by saying I started my first company when I was 16, but there was a young lady in the back who's 13 and who already started her own company. So I feel a little intimidated by that to some extent. So let's forget about that for a moment. I think maybe we should leave it there for the 3 minutes. I think that's the intro.
Let's see, here we are. Anne Coquette, that's me. Hi everybody, I'm the founder and CEO of The Guild. And The Guild is a networking platform that makes networking less awkward and a little bit more convenient. And why is that? Has anybody ever found themselves in a new city with 0 friends and 0 contacts? Yeah, a couple of hands go up. And you know how that feels, right? You're there, you start over. Your network usually doesn't come with you like your container or your moving van, and so you just have to start over again. And I did that a couple of times in my life. I'm originally from Germany, and after Germany, and studying computer science, etc., I went to Australia and did some great adventures there to then go back to Switzerland and did a lot of management consulting and traveling a lot. And then from there, I went traveling again in South America and came back to the UK to do a big IT outsourcing project where Orange and T-Mobile merged. And from there, I came to the US 6 years ago. And as you can see, a lot of times I was in these new cultures, new situations, and had to start over again. And so when I landed here in San Francisco 6 years ago, I thought, well, isn't there a better way than going to all these networking events and standing there with your heels and the Chardonnay in your hand gets really warm and you exchange these business cards and then you almost know for sure that they will end up in the trash the next day. And it's just this really, really difficult process and wears you out. And then I also realized a lot of the networking events I went to were mostly male and the panels were mostly male, which was great content, but I felt like, well, where are my role models here? And so that's why I started The Guild, and The Guild is a networking platform that takes your entire profile into account. So not just your resume points and where you studied and what you did in your career, but also where do you want to go in your career and what's next for you and where can others help you, and also what's the fun in your life, and maybe you connect over that. Like I'm a kite surfer and I love going out on the bay and in the ocean and kite surf, and I love being on the water with my friends and my husband, and maybe there's other people and we can connect through that as well and then create business relationships and further. And so that's what I set out to do about 2 years ago after a career at Genentech in their innovation team that really helped me make a sense of the ecosystem here and set out to build The Guild. And during that Genentech journey, actually, Torsten and I worked together on a really cool innovation challenge that was a global call for solutions for startups in the cervical cancer space to prevent cervical cancer at a really early stage. And Torsten and his company were an amazing partner for Genentech, that had never done anything like it, and it was very, very hard to drive change in an organization like Genentech that's highly regulated and pharma industry. So yeah, that was fantastic. I tried to still innovate in the networking space in other areas. I'm still advising startups in the digital health space as well. And every now and then there is a startup idea that comes around that I explore with students as well at the California Academy of the Arts or University of San Francisco. And then sometimes there's even, a side project and a side hustle that comes out of that gets funding. And we just talked about this. There's a pet nutrition startup that I've also co-founded a while ago that was one of those projects. So a lot of side hustles in my life and a lot of excitement for new things. And with that, we'll move on to the next person.
So I guess I have to use this because I actually submitted 3 slides. So here we are. So I'm Gerald Quintus Boss. I am the English-speaking Mexican with a Dutch name. So my father's Dutch, my mother's Mexican. I'm actually from Mexico. So that's my background. I studied mechanical engineering, bachelor's and master's, and then went into a job at IDEO Product Development, which you may have heard. Started over here, Palo Alto, and then went worldwide. And after some amount of time, left there, went to a startup in semiconductor, wet chemical etching machines for semiconductor wafers. And then finally, after that, started Cooper Perkins, which is a technology development consulting firm. So that career was marching along really well until about 2007, when I started volunteering for IDDS, which is the International Development Design Summit. And that was an event focused on teaching creativity and design to communities in the developing world. That lasted until like 2012. I was at it for about 5 years, going to Colorado and to Kumasi, Ghana, to teach these creativity methods and entrepreneurship methods to people in the developing world. And then I started teaching at MIT. So right now I teach a class called Design for Scale at MIT. It's a little bit relevant to entrepreneurship because, these are pictures of some of the devices that we designed. Before I leave this slide, some of the devices that we designed at Cooper Perkins. These guys here are devices for Genentech. So we've been hired by Genentech to design medical delivery devices and pieces of capital equipment to do research. All right, so the class I teach at MIT is called Design for Scale, which is design for manufacturing for products headed into the developing world. The interesting thing about the Design for Scale is that the challenge for the students, in order to understand what to do with manufacturing in the developing world, is where to make something. Should you make it globally or locally? That's a big question, among many other things. So for the class, in order to get them going in that entrepreneurial experience, we find entrepreneurs in the developing world as clients. And in their position, they are starting as from a working prototype, and they're trying to move into production. So the students form consultant teams, and they help them move into production. And in that process, we begin with a study of what the client is doing in their space, what their market might be like, what the value chain is like, what the opportunities for innovation are like, how they understand their users. So we cover all those sort of business aspects of the company so that the students can make better decisions about what they're about to design, and then they launch into engineering design. So, and of course, they get to do a lot of hands-on work because it's a class about manufacturing as well. So that we take them to the MIT's foundry to do some castings. They do some injection molding. They do circuit boards. They do wireforms. And these are some of the entrepreneurs that we've worked with. So people doing instrumented wheelchairs in the developing world in order to characterize the use of wheelchairs. It just so happens that this is a pretty interesting space for study, because wheelchairs are the type of product that a particular organization or individual buys and then somebody else uses. So there's a disconnect. If you look at the value chain, there's a disconnect between the user and the person that designs and the person that sells. And that is a nice recipe for not getting the design right. And so that piece of technology that was developed by Sensen, and actually that one of the teams in class helped develop the housing for, is in an attempt to close that loop, to give more feedback to the designers so that they can make better wheelchairs and understand what's happening to the users in the developing world. So water filters, this is a project that came out of IDDS back in 2008. It's nipple shield. The challenge was, how do you prevent babies in the developing world from getting AIDS by breastfeeding? So bottled milk is not an acceptable solution in the developing world because of many reasons. So what the team brainstormed, what they found that they could do was they could take a nipple shield and put a drug cartridge in it, like a piece of foam with drug embedded in the cartridge. So that
So the milk came.
yeah, so the mother's milk goes through that with normal breastfeeding and treats the milk. So that was out of IDDS. A lot of grain processing, a lot of recycling solutions. So just a bunch of different things that happen because of MIT's D Lab. So D Lab is a part of MIT that focuses on the design for the developing world, and I'm teaching a class in that. And these are some of the entrepreneurs out of there. Anyway, I think I might have chewed up more than 3 minutes. So
These are great information. Thank you. Yeah, just to follow up on what Harold has said, today's our topic is innovative ways to engage and educate next generation entrepreneurs. And when we talk about next generation, these are people of strong characteristics. 70% statistics shows that 70% of them are not only looking for financial gains in their jobs, they're looking to make an impact, they're looking to, make a difference in the world. So looking at your projects, this recycling, clean tech, green projects, these are really, really great projects to engage the next generations. So I do wish, we can engage more Pan-Asian leaders or Pan-Asian younger generation to involve in your MIT projects. And
Pacific Rim.
yeah, across the Pacific Rim.
Mexico is on this side of the Pacific.
yes.
Yes.
So that left of the solar collectors there are for South Africa. The one to the left are insulation panels for Pakistan. No, at the bottom right. One to the left of that. Those are insulation panels for Pakistan that were done back in 2014, I think. Those panels. So there's an entrepreneur in Pakistan that determined. Yeah. Oh, sorry. If you went to enlighten that story, so an entrepreneur in Pakistan determined that people are using a lot of energy, consuming a lot of solid fuel, heating their houses because it was cold, and they were heating their houses because they're insulated poorly. So without wanting to get into advanced materials that lack recyclability and other things, they decided to experiment with paper pulp, recycled paper pulp. So turning paper pulp into panels and putting a decorative coating on them that then you could put inside your house to insulate it to reduce your energy use. So and that was this. So there's there's a little bit of from all over the world. But
where was this?
that is India. The wheelchair is India. These grains are Africa. This is Nigeria, recycling program in Nigeria. This, I think, is Uganda, cook stove maca. This is Bangladesh. It's a water pump for farmers. So these are all entrepreneurs. Wishing
With the right partners, would China be interested?
potentially, yeah, we should talk.
Well, actually, yes.
Awesome. Let's move on. All right. So here comes to our panel questions. Our audience are people in their age range between 12 and 34, and they speak a totally different language, are looking for something just for money gains. They're looking to make a change. My question is, what are the innovative ways you use that are proven successful to engage them, to make them, interested in starting their own company and make them determined to start their own company or business?
Me?
Who volunteers?
And you can pass if you want. None of you has to answer all three questions.
Shall I stand?
And then we'll start the other.
All right. Most successful tour experience. What did I learn from it? I think, in my point of view, the most successful experience is by doing it. So if you want to become an entrepreneur, just be one, and it's probably a guarantee you will fail the first time, but you will learn a great deal out of it, and it's nothing more powerful learning by doing. So that's I think that works for me, and it will work for everyone.
How did your entrepreneurial journey start? Did you start right after college, or?
No, I started the most boring job after college. It's being an investment banker. So that's my first job, but that's back in 2007. And at that time, people think being an investment banker is cool. Not anymore. I mean, not even then back then. So I started as an investment banker and the most hated person people on the planet, and then right after I was because I'm from China, we are the only child. My father is also an entrepreneur, so I actually got to work for him. Totally disaster. But of course, you learn a lot from that because our family business is in real estate machinery, so it's really hands-on, and you do get to talk to all kinds of people from different walks, including, of course, construction workers. I actually made a great friends. Even until today, I still make contact with, and that's a very nice piece of lesson for me as a Chinese to understand China, because China is a very complex, just like any country, any environment. And being an entrepreneur is very complex, and you need to be able to not only being flexible, you know when to be flexible, where to be firm, and how to make decisions. What are the when to call a shot, when to make a stop. So it's and so I learned all this by making failures and by doing it. And so after that, I actually only started my first company in 2003, and that was a total failure. But I get to fail on someone else's money, which is investors' money. So that's great for me. And so the second startup is AI Law. AI Law is building legal robotics by using machine learning. It's a chat box. So that's the company I sold it last year. As an entrepreneur, selling your company is always the second choice. And of course, the third choice will be filling it. And so I made all the possible mistakes one entrepreneur could make at the first startup, and I made half of them at the second. So great learning curve, 50% improvement there. So now it's my third. Hopefully, I'll do better this time. So. Thanks.
That's a hard one to go next from. I have a number of questions. So you failed, but you sold it for $11 million.
Kind of.
That's pretty good. I just want to say as a point of failure. So I'm gonna go over here again just so I'm not in the way of anything here. I think the most useful tool that I've found in the process of communicating entrepreneurship, and it is really, you have to remember, I agree with you. You can't teach somebody entrepreneurship. You have to learn it yourself, and you really have to. And yes, it's about just getting started on it for sure. But in a kind of educational situation, I think it's all about making sure that you provide the opportunity for that learning, essentially. And I've tried a lot of different things in different cultures and different places, and I think my favorite tool is actually to use a spreadsheet to talk about operational, how does a startup work. So, and I'm an engineer, and I like numbers and spreadsheets, right? Those that know me know that. But this whole process, instead of putting slides up, to actually put a spreadsheet up on the screen and then say, okay, let's talk about this. Here's the money coming in. Here's the money going out. Here's, month by month, a quarter by quarter, and actually going through the same process as you would do yourself if you were starting a business. That probably is my favorite way to do it.
I'll probably have to counter the numbers and the analytics with community. I think it's a really, really important piece to teaching and learning entrepreneurship, because it's an incredibly hard and painful journey, and nobody ever talks about it. You only see like the glorious $11 million sale, but you don't know what's behind the scenes. And I think you can only be a strong entrepreneur and pull through if you have that community. And obviously, I mean, this is kind of like a plug for myself and the Guild. The Guild has a community like that where you connect with other entrepreneurs to make it a little bit easier. But I've also seen that it starts very early on. And I think also one of the reasons why only 2% of solo purely female-founded companies only 2% of the venture money goes to female-founded companies is because there isn't enough women and girls that are being taught how to be entrepreneurs and how to take risk in our society. And so there's really great opportunities early on in the process of, you know, example sitting here, someone at 13 years saying, I founded a startup and this is what I do, and making that acceptable and giving those girls and young boys the tools to do that. And so one startup is that is focusing on that is called Bossy Girl, and it lets you, for instance, put a new brand on all kinds of things, and it makes the process really easy. And you also have a online shop there, and you can start promoting your brand, and you just learn all these nuts and bolts of what it means to have a business. And then there's other communities like Iridescent, which is a great community for STEM-focused education that teaches STEM at a really early stage together with the parents. And they have this fantastic thing called the Curiosity Machine. And you can do all these cool experiments at home and create gravity valves with your things and clothes at home, and it's just fantastic. And so the teachers are the parents, but also the kids. And I think there's a wealth of tools and things like that out there right now and are being developed that are really important to bring that next wave of entrepreneurs into our current, you know, into that in the 20s to then start their companies. And yeah, I don't know how you feel, but for me, without community and for me, without, you know, having that call to Torsten saying, hey, can you sit down with me and go over my term sheet and that convertible note, that really happened, right? And he's someone I trust, and it's okay for me to go through all these details. And, you know, you can't do that in a forum online. While those are great as well, but you have to have those connections, and it's really important to nurture them.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I do want to invite two of the girls sitting down there who are 13 years old to come over. One of them has already been an entrepreneur herself. Yeah, so this is a topic about you. We do want to know what is the best way to engage you. We want to know what is the current entrepreneur curriculum looks like in high school. And also we want to know how did you start your business? Who wants to start?
Okay, I'll go. So when I was like 8, I don't know, I was a crazy child. I went up to random people and asked if I could walk your dog. And a lot of the times they said no, but I just kept asking. And one of the times one person said yes, and so I just kept, and I walked their dog, and then we made plans to come back on these days, and I would walk them. And then another person came up to me and said, could you walk my dog? And I was like, okay, yeah, sure. And then one of them asked, how much do you want to be paid? And I was like, paid? I was little, I was so confused. And then, and so they paid me, and then I was like, oh, okay. So then one time, Lena had a little Pomeranian, that was the first dog I walked, needed to go somewhere. So she's like, can I bring my dog over to your house? I was like, yeah, go ahead, sure. And so she came over to my house, and I was watching him, and then someone else noticed how I was watching a dog, and then they asked, and then they told their friends what I did, and then that's basically just how it started.
Wow.
Well, I personally don't have a startup company, but Darlene and we are planning on working together. Her idea is connecting something that starts with Rover, if anyone's heard of that. It's like a dog walking, sitting company. And Darlene had a really good idea of basing something off of that to keep building her company, and her and I were going to be partners in this. So that's kind of how we are doing it.
That's the community, right? You have your cool entrepreneur friend, and then you start working something together. Yeah, I do wish you have more friends, you know, that can engage more of your peers and work on their companies. That's great. Thank you.
Can I ask one question? Would you consider cat walking? Well, actually, cat sitting, because cats don't like to be walked, but they love to be sat.
They're
for.
crazy. I have 3 at my house.
Okay, so
This one lady, she asked me Okay. So this one lady, she asked me, so after I did my dog sitting, this one lady's like, "Can you watch my cat and my hamster?" I was like, yeah, sure, I'm okay with it. And I was like, okay. And she's like, and then my sister has another animal, like a rabbit. And I was like, okay. So I
So
just started.
you're in the pet taking care of pets business, just not just dogs.
Yeah.
All right, that's fine. Now, do you have any other kinds of animals you'd like her to think about getting into the care of?
Well, I mean, dogs are like a big one that usually a lot of people have, and cats. And what's new? So I guess she just came up with this idea today. So I guess what's basing off of this is now doing some more animals. Maybe, I don't know, like cats, as you said. Maybe birds. I don't know. Coming to mind. Coming to mind. I have a horse, so I could. I don't know. Personally, I have a horse, so I know how to take care of that. And I have quite a lot of animals at my house, so definitely a lot more coming up after that.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Okay.
Yeah. Isn't it ever? All right, so what's the most successful tool? So I think of it in actually two different dimensions. So when you're starting a venture, you want to think about the business side of things, like why are you doing something and what are you doing? Essentially making discoveries about the need, who has the pain, how many people is it, what is it worth to them to solve it, and then the other side of that is the technology, which is how do you meet that need? How do you satisfy that need that's been identified? So the business side, what's the need, and the technology side, how do you solve it? So one of the tools that we used at IDDS was really teaching the design process by identifying actual problems in the developing world that had to be solved. So we gathered groups from all over the world, and we're looking at bike mechanics and pastors and some engineers and just everyone interested in helping the developing world, and a lot of people from the developing world. And we presented them with a problem. We taught them the design process for problem solving, and that's all about essentially a little bit about understanding the user, but a lot about coming up with the design. So it's focused on the how problem. How do you solve that problem to develop the technology? At MIT in my class, Design for Scale, one of the things that works really well to inspire students is to connect them to the entrepreneurs in the developing world and have them participate in that design process. So they get to learn about what's happening by helping the entrepreneur. The entrepreneur is happy because they're getting free labor, and the students get to go along for the roller coaster ride and learn some things. Especially, so the first part of the course we focus on the business aspects of how the entrepreneurs might have identified the need, how they understand their users, what the value chain is like, what they consider are the principal factors, innovative factors in success. All those things we teach them before we jump into the design, and so they get to experience what that process is like, so they can be better connected with entrepreneurs, which for us means they make better design decisions when they start.
Yes.
Connecting. Yeah. So that's what GELI tries to do, is to, educate the younger generation by having them working with the founders, so they learn by doing.
I'm going to cheat because I'm going to ask about failures, and I'm going to tell you what my biggest failure was. But it turns out I started my first company when I was 12. And I did it for a very practical reason. I was the first of 5 children, and I knew how to babysit because I was the first of 5 children. And there was one Friday night a month that there was a dance at the Southside Women's Club that I wanted to go, and I wanted to wear Gant shirts, which are very expensive. My mom and dad said, "No, we're not buying you a shirt. If you're going to buy a Gant shirt, you got to earn the money to do it." And I said, what I noticed was that the families, like the husbands and wives in the neighborhood, wanted to go out on Friday and Saturday night. The problem was that the teenage girls were going out on dates on Friday and Saturday night. And so I went door to door. Also, I loved cutting the grass. I actually loved cutting the grass. So I would knock on the door and I'd say, I'm only 12, but I'm the first of 5 children, and so I know how to feed babies, change their diapers, blah, 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 burp them, whatever. And I'm really good at getting kids to be so worn out by the time they're done playing with me that they'll be fast asleep by the time you get home. In addition, if you don't want to deal with the hassle of mowing the lawn in the heat, I love mowing the lawn. And so I basically said, I have two products. and usually both the moms and dads were going, we'll do the babysitting thing. And often the dad would go, yeah, why not? This guy's not charging that much. We'll let him do the lawn as well. I had 80% market share in a 2-block area. And that's the most successful business I've ever had. Now we're going to go on to failures. So I was a next-gen entrepreneur back then. That was back then. I love teaching, and I love teaching young people. And part of what we want to do is learn by doing. So we had this course that was really popular at Stanford called Technology Entrepreneurship. And they said, Tom, you're only doing one of these batches of 60 people a year. We want to have more. I said, how many more? They said 5 sections of 60. I went, that's kind of a lot. And they said, how about 3 sections of 60 running simultaneously? And I said, okay. Stupid Tom didn't ask what it would be like when you have a really entrepreneurial course that's very interactive. So imagine it's a hot summer at Stanford. The only room that we could get that had room for 180 students, it turns out, didn't have air conditioning. Stanford without air conditioning is terrible. But then part of the class, part of the grade in the class, 20% of the grade in the class is based on talking in class. When you triple the number of people who have to get credit by talking in class and you don't triple the amount of time, it means that for sure, at least half of the class can't possibly talk enough to get a good grade in the class. Now, this thing blew up in mid-flight in about week 2. The student said, we're not coming to class in that hot classroom. And you moron, what were you thinking about 20% of our grade? And I went, okay, the good news is we had a bigger place at Stanford, so we could find an air-conditioned room that comfortably held all of them. And we said, forget about the 20% of your grade that's in class. You can do it on an online forum. You can do some other thing as a project. So that 20%, you can figure out what you want to do as a team of students and as individuals to earn that grade. That's still, even with that modification, that's the lowest teaching evaluation I've ever gotten in my entire career. It was really bad. It was really bad. Now, with that as prologue, what tool experience was your biggest failure in educating next-gen entrepreneurs? I mean, I did the worst belly flop on earth. So you can't have failed that badly, right? And Kathy, but you talked about failures. You can just.
Yeah, I can just pass. Yeah, already done enough for that.
Fine.
Yes.
So I can share a couple of failures. I mean, we all had various failures, and I'm going to go up here and do it. So since I'm not really in the teaching business like Tom is, I don't think I have.
Not anymore. I quit.
Was.
I'm free.
I think I have. I mean, I have. In a lot of cases, had to, in various ways, attempt to teach entrepreneurship, and generally hasn't gone well, except for the spreadsheets, of course. Remember that. But I'll share a couple other quick, fun failures. I think back in the day, I was really fascinated about Bitcoin when it was just out, right? And I remember I was telling some friends of mine that yeah, it's only $30 per Bitcoin, and like we should totally buy it. And then we got each other work up about this idea of buying a lot of Bitcoin because it was like tomorrow's big thing, right? And I didn't buy a single Bitcoin, and to this day I have not done that. And so financially that was a terrible idea. But I think on a slightly more serious note, startup-wise, in terms of entrepreneur learning-wise, right, the biggest failure I think that I have done is that in the name of focus, I haven't made the right decisions along the way in building uNoodle, the company. So Rebecca and myself, along the way, could have easily focused a lot more. It's really about knowing, like, when do you focus on dog walking and scaling your dog walking business, and when do you diversify into horses and cats and all this other stuff, and making those decisions at the right time. So consequently, we diversified too early. We try to launch new products without having the resources to do it, and we just got ourselves into all these sort of dead ends. That meant that had we not done that, we could have built what we had today much faster than 7 years. And I think that's probably, looking back, the single biggest failure. But we all learn, It's an experience. It's a journey.
Well, personally, I thought it was a good idea after 3 years in management consulting and big paychecks and flying everywhere every week and having all these meals on your company's dime to do an art stall at the Swiss Christmas market because I thought that's my next passion, and it was a terrible failure. And I think partially because I didn't do the research, because I didn't recognize that what I was trying to do was required more than just sitting at home and creating some artsy products that hopefully somebody would want. And I also didn't ask people that had already done that how they did that and what works and what doesn't. So typical entrepreneurial failures. But to the question of like ecosystems and like what are those educational next gen entrepreneur schools and programs that are in place that don't quite work. I think there's a couple of things, and I look at that from the not the entrepreneurial lens, but from the lens of having worked in an innovation department at a big pharma company. I think you always need the program to be pushed by senior leadership, no matter where that is, if it's at Stanford or if it's at Genentech or if it's a school, right? If you don't have that buy-in by the leadership, it's very, very likely that your programs will fail because you won't get the resources, you won't get the budget over time to really make that happen. And then the other thing is too, we're looking at Silicon Valley, right, as this incredible ecosystem of startups that are coming up and becoming decacorns now. And I wonder if that entire system is actually set up to fail, because what we're seeing now are huge, humongous companies like Amazon and Google and Facebook that are gobbling up every innovation that's happening at a very early stage. And part of it is because these companies raise money. They raise money on certain milestones. They have to hit those milestones really fast. And then you get into the situation where now you either have to sell off, or you're dead in the water, or you raise that other 10 million round. And I think what happens is it actually drains the innovation ecosystem. And a lot of startups are being bought very early on and don't become these butterflies in new Amazons, right? So there is no real competition anymore. And if you really look at the numbers as well, and I can't state the numbers right now, but I know that, for instance, in comparison to France, the US is putting out way less innovative new companies that are making it to IPO than France, and then also 10 to 20 years ago. And so I think we have to think about that entire system. And if that's what we're doing, right, are we educating the entrepreneurs in the right ways? Are we giving them ecosystems like Y Combinator and those accelerators that are setting us up for success and are setting the founders up for success and are also setting up as a society for success? And yeah, that's...
Yeah, so actually 70% of the, millennials or Generation Z, they say they want to start their own company, but now the question boils down to when do they start it? They are not feeling supported, or they don't have this institutional support to get them started. So that's why I think GELI is here to outreach to them and bring resources to them and let them know that we are here.
Failures, where to begin? All right, so back to the developing world. In the developing world, one of the major mistakes that's made that we try to highlight in our class is a failure to understand your users. So Paul Polak wrote a book on the business solution to poverty, and one of his arguments was that if you haven't talked to at least 100 people, then you should forget about what you're doing, essentially not do it, then don't do it. So many stories of not understanding the users and not being, it is, he has some tough advice, but it's real advice when you're in the developing world, because it's so easy to pretend that you can put yourself in their shoes and go, I'm going to solve this problem. I know they need this. For example, the filter straw, the socket ball. The stories go on. The play pump. The play pump was a particularly bad story about pumping water out of the ground using a playground carousel that you run around. So they figured that this all sounded very legitimate, by the way. So it's a very serious effort in the beginning. So the idea was women were pumping water out of wells with manual pumps, and so an entrepreneur thought, why don't I make a machine to get the kids to play? When the kids play, they'll pump the water at the same time that they're playing. Uh, so so they got funding. They started distributing this. They got a lot of coverage in the news. Definitely, the communities were excited about getting this new toy. But of course, what they ended up finding out was that the people that run around the carousel, the kids, they don't do it for long enough, right? They stop, and so so then what happens is the mothers start to walk like mules around in circles until they're so dizzy they vomit to pump water. So that wasn't that effective. But whenever anybody went to look, especially like Westerners, all the kids go running towards the toy and play with it. So that's just a common thing that happens in the developing world. We try and teach the students about ways in which they can reach out to their users, and in this case, their clients do. But in my ambition to cover all this ground, right? So there's the understand the users, there's the understand the business. Oh, and by the way, the class is on manufacturing, so we have to teach engineering. So I ended up teaching a ton of stuff, and then went too thin on some material. So that was I got a little bit of bad feedback about that.
But the thing that is striking me about what you're saying and what all of the panelists are saying, not all, there is a pattern. And certainly, Torsten, you said spread too thin, needed to focus. My biggest failure that in the classroom was spread too thin. You've had that experience. All of you have been extraordinarily successful. I'm not sure whether either Kathy or Anne, have you ever had a need to focus? I was listening. But this is important. So you've really.
I actually, one thing I do want to emphasize is I didn't realize that at the early stage of my entrepreneurship journey, but I do realize now is sometimes as entrepreneur, of course there's no lazy entrepreneur because there's tons of things you just say you always run out of time and you end up run long hours. But I do realize one thing is when we run long hours in the office, that could also mean it's a laziness. It's not a laziness for not doing your work, but it's a laziness to think strategically. Because at the end of the day, what makes your company grow is not the spreadsheets you finish today. It's not a PowerPoint. It's a right decision you make. And probably that's require once every year. Are you able to make that strategic decision? Are you constantly drive yourself to think? Because nothing is more tiring than think. Doing is easy. So I think I often identify that if you work really long hours, that's probably because you are lazy. There. Hopefully, yeah.
I want to add on that because I think at the end of the day, we're all made of decisions, and think is bigger than do. And actually, we're going to, as part of GELI's pilot program, we're going to invite a master on decision making. He's going to guide our students to consciously examine their self-decision making process so that they can think strategically, not just to work aggressively and never stop and pause to think again.
Yeah, I have a quick comment on that. I actually have a bracelet and it says focus so that I don't forget because it's
You're not
so.
wearing it, though.
Doesn't need that anymore.
Because as an entrepreneur, that's in your DNA. You get excited and so passionate about new things and new technologies, and then somebody else comes around and tells you about Bitcoin, and oh my God, imagine all all the possibilities there, and you want to build and you want to innovate, right? That's in our DNA. That's why we're entrepreneurs. And I think there's actually three types of entrepreneurs. There's the ones that are really good starters, and then there's the ones that are really good at growing something and at just like grinding and keeping at it. And then there's the ones that are amazing leaders that bring big companies together and hire the right people. And so I'm certainly the starter type, and I am really excited about starting new things all the time. And that's why I need my focus bracelet I'm not wearing to keep at it and to not forget that, and know that I have to develop myself and my skills and everything to get in that second and that third phase.
Yeah.
I'm going to weigh in with a real solution to this problem. It's very old school. It's called a daytimer. And the way I focus is in the morning, I meditate. 2 minutes, 3 minutes. We're not talking about going to a temple or anything. We're talking about, looking out the window at the sun. And I'll pass this around. Basically, what I do after meditating is I write down what I did the previous day, every hour of the previous day. How much time did I sleep? How much time was I grooming, which is taking showers and stuff. And it was a discipline that I developed when I was consulting because I was working too many hours. And I said, I've got to get to 55 hours work a week, 7 hours sleep a night, exercise, and that little tool changed my life for the better. Now I've gone off and on. It turns out there's an app for that. Not for this, but there's an app for really lovely meditation. And we'll talk about it. Can you hold that? I'll pull it up. No, there really is. It's really good. Because I've been just using Thich Nhat Hanh, no app needed. And Thich Nhat Hanh is a Vietnamese Buddhist monk who, has anybody read any of his books? Thich Nhat Hanh? Wow. Read pieces every step, and your life will change. Because he'll teach you how to meditate while doing the dishes, while stuck at a stoplight, whenever. But if you don't want to do that, Aura is an app in the App Store that has all sorts of different ways to meditate and really sort of be fully present. And I think all of you know what it's like to be fully present. That's when you have the insight that can lead to a strategic decision. That's when you realize, ooh, we're spread a little bit too thin, because Torsten is no stranger to strategic thinking. I know that for sure. As a Dane, he's kind of prone not to brag, unlike, I was going to say unlike Germans, but that would be, sorry. Sorry. I'm Polish and Irish, and you know what the Germans did to at least the Polish. No, I'll stop that. In fact, take that off because that's completely irrelevant and wrong. But do think about breathing. And in fact, we have enough. I think we have enough. I think we have enough for one for each person of the Hearthstones.
Oh yeah. Tom has this big thing of Hearthstone greeting, and every one of you is invited to pick a Hearthstone afterwards. All right, last question. Where are your favorite places to run educational programs? Be specific about the country and region. Is this straightforward? Torsten first.
I'm gonna be the nerd that I am and say the virtual world, and I mean that, and I'll come up here just so the cameras are right. I mean that because I feel like, so I moved here 8 years ago, and there's no doubt that a lot of the in-person conversations I've had with a lot of people, Tom included, have really, really helped me move forward as an entrepreneur. But I have to, looking back, it is because of the people that I have around me here and not necessarily because of the in-person connection. And what I find fascinating is when you are able to provide that in a virtual fashion, you reach people around the world that can gain so much more from the knowledge that these people have. And I think the best example I have is YouNoodle did a project with for the World Bank that we did with a company called Voyage. The project was about empowering women entrepreneurs around the Middle East and North Africa and for logical reasons, we were not able to get them all in the same room essentially. So what we did was we did this virtual program where we had both webinars and mentors that were helping the women in various capacities, right? And it was all virtual, so they could stay wherever they are. And we had almost 2,000 women founders around the Middle East and North Africa that were part of this program. And what I remember is that so myself and Yasmin, the CEO of Voyage, was sitting here in the back. We opened this in the first webinar, right? And we thought we were going to be like, oh, great, we're going to tell you about all this fun stuff. And as we were starting this webinar, the chat window next to it completely exploded with all these women founders that realized that there are people doing exactly the same thing as them, but just like in the neighboring town and neighboring state and neighboring country. And the amount of connections that were made in the process of us taking them through a number of these webinars were just amazing. And so I know it's not the answer you're looking for, but there are fantastic powers in the virtual world when you can bring capacities across borders. I think that's going to be my answer. Anybody else?
So, okay, so IDDS, which was the International Development Design Summit, turned into IDIN after some USAID funding. Sorry for all the acronyms. And I re-engaged with that this past year, 2017. We were doing a conference to help entrepreneurs in Oaxaca that are dealing with the marginalized communities there. Oaxaca is one of the poorest states in Mexico. And there was a focus to strengthen the entrepreneurs there. So the program was held in La Calera. La Calera is an old abandoned talc processing factory. And what was really cool about that space is it was also turned into sort of a slightly artistic, not a museum, but a lot of art hanging. But what was really cool about that space is in the back you had the massive drying towers for the cal. Now it escapes me what the name of it is in English, and then all the processing machinery in the middle that was all abandoned and rusted and frozen into place. So we used that space as a place where the participants could interact and experience teamwork, live in that place for 2 weeks. So it was a 2-week-long program where they cohabitate in that place. And what I found was it was really inspirational in terms of the kind of connections, the peace, the different locations within the space that you could work. So bringing people together and having them spend time together, solving problems that are pressing in their communities is a really powerful tool. And in that case, it's La Calera in Oaxaca.
Kathy, represent Chengdu.
Chengdu. And well, of course, Chengdu is my favorite city. Of course, that's where both of us are from. And for all of you haven't visited, it's a must. And the food is amazing. But actually, while I was listening to the panelists, I've been thinking one question. I want to just bring up this question, based on my own experiences, can be shallow, but honestly. And sometimes I do actually question. There's a huge amount of power of connectivity, but I also at the same time question the power or the real power of connection. Just imagine all the people you have met. I'm sure that today, sitting on the panel, you have met like thousands of, more than thousands of people of the connection. So it's not about, at least based on my point of view, I think it's not about who you have met, who you have made contact with. It's about, first of all, asking the right question if when you want to reach out for help. Because the people you are reaching out for help, they're gonna be busy. Otherwise, people who can help you gonna be busy. If they are not busy, they probably can't help you anyway. So you need to be very strategic about what kind of help you are asking. And no one like to, constantly helping people 24 hours is tiring. And as a human being, I'm gonna say, well, we are generous, but it's just unable to. Therefore, I think it's also very important for entrepreneur to design your help into a longer term of partnership. if there's something. So I think it's at the end of the day, it's not about the people you are meeting. It's not about the conversation you are having. It's not about it's also in the virtual world and you reaching out to people, but it's about designing. And at the end of the day, we again come down to the strategy. So there should be a strategy, a piece of strategy in everything you do, and that's your goal. And when you have a clear strategy, a clear goal, you have a slightly clear path to follow that. You are much more likely to get help. And of course, build long-time, meaningful partnership and friendship. So that's what I think.
So when you sign up to the guild, you create a profile that's a profile about yourself, and then we connect you to other people. And I know people like Annie have tried it and met a lot of people here in San Francisco through that. And I think what's new about that is that it's not somebody who is in your bubble, but it's somebody who you might not see. It's somebody who might be in your blind spot. And that's where the guild's algorithms come in to connect you with that one person that we think you should have a coffee with and have a meeting and see where that leads. And a lot of like innovation and new ideas spring from these meetings. And now that we also expanded to Chicago and have a virtual chat function, we have these exchanges also happening between Portland and New York and LA and San Francisco. And that has already shown that totally new ideas came up. And even my guild meetings have changed because I see people in those cities and I hear their stories. And I understand all of a sudden that the Chamber of Commerce in Chicago has way more power and is way more important than it may here be here, right? And so I think that's really important to use technology and new innovation that's out there to connect with people and to really like create entrepreneurial ecosystems. And then the other piece that I wanted to talk about is a little bit similar to bringing people together in one place. And so last year, we did a little bit of a brainstorming meeting, which is one of my favorite meetings at the Guild, and said, what else can we innovate and where else do people connect and network? And the conference came up. And when you say conference, you probably think of a big ballroom in a Hilton hotel, and you have that one speaker on stage and you see each other's backs, right? And we thought, well, maybe we can change that and maybe we can innovate that model and break it up and make it a specific, women-specific conference where we bring people together in 10 unique spaces that have different themes around workshops and topics that are important to women. And that's a conference we ran last year, and the Vault was a partner, which was fantastic. So we had one house here, the Founders Meet Funders house. We had a coaching house. We had a starting something house. There was a house about storytelling. And people from all over the country flew in for that to experience the San Francisco ecosystem, not just with the people, but also with the different spaces in this beautiful city. And so we're doing that again this year in October, and we have already about 80 speakers that are coming for that, for hosting 40 different sessions on these 2 days on October 26th and 27th. And you know, it takes people like us and entrepreneurs to come up with new models that might work and we need to try out, because we can't just say, look, to the Startup World Cup conference, for instance, why did you have 8 male speakers on stage and not one female keynote speaker? You know, we can point that out and people can say, yes, that's not okay, but it's for us to change that, and it's for us to create new models, how we innovate together and how we create that community to keep innovating and changing and being the change we want to see.
Thank you, Anne. I love what you do. I do. And I want to publicly apologize for something I did that was really stupid. In trying to kid around and, you know, Torsten, and I made a remark about where Anne was born. And that's not right. It's not right. So I apologize. And I adore you, I admire you, and so I hope you'll accept my Apology. Okay. Now, I'm going to say thank you so much to all of you. You're going to say thank you to all of them, and then you have a surprise, right?
What surprise?
Somebody's going to
Well,
come
then
up.
you got surprised.
Somebody's going to come up and do something, or we're going to announce something.
Oh yeah.
Okay, but first.
I mean,
But first.
yeah, I definitely want to thank every one of our panelists here. And, we invite each one of you for a reason. I think you cover a region that we want to reach: Mexico, Germany, Denmark, China. And it's also aligned with the mission of GELI, which is to help global rising leaders. We have this global vision. And partially of what we do, that we plan to launch a pilot program next winter, and we are bringing Pan-Asian students to Silicon Valley and pair them with American students of their same age and have them work together so that they can know each other, to know a different culture, and form some kind of friendship even after the program ends. One of the life missions of Tom is actually to raise the peace along the Pacific Rim, and one of my personal life mission is to leverage my cultural background, my Asian background, to foster cultural communication and cultural exchanges. So this is something I'm gonna do for the rest of my life, and I'm deciding to quit my job, my full-time job as a data scientist at a private bank very soon. But I'm very lucky because I think I found my passion. I found what I think I'm proud to tell everyone. And yeah, so yeah, thank you guys. Thank you. Thank you so much for coming. And I do want to introduce.
One
Sorry.
last thing before you introduce. I think, Anne, you said something about, we see 8 guys and 1 female on the stage. And something that is my number 2 after Peace on the Pacific Rim is to help women. I used to say level a playing field, but in another event here, I heard a very intelligent woman say, let's not level a playing field, let's help women create a new playing field, which is and that's what you're doing, right? And that's what all 4 of our panelists are doing. If we think about what really UNoodle is all about, and so on, what Kathy, you're doing in your own work, all of you. And think about the work in the developing world. You're bringing the best and the brightest of people who come to MIT, and they're not all Americans, right? They're from all over the world, and you take them to a developing So I'm ranting, but I do. I guess what we're saying is, besides to address the issue that Anne was talking about, it will always be teams of 4 at 2 genders in equal measure. So teams of 4, 2 women, 2 men, and preferably 3 countries, if not 4 countries. That kind of, if you put teams of 4 young people to work with both men and women from different countries to help a startup by doing whatever they're going to do, customer development, for example, those startups are going to get solutions they can't get anywhere else. And those young people will build friendships that they can't build back home. And so for all of you as global entrepreneurial leaders, you've taught us a lot today and in your past work about how to do this. Please keep working with us. We need your help, right? We do.
Yes.
And then?
Yeah, and also, I think GELI is constantly looking for mentors. If you think you're qualified to be a mentor, please talk to me. And also, we're looking for people like Grace and Darling, who are having great potential to kickstart their own career even before college. And we also want to engage you more. So if you do have friends who are interested in working with us and attending our program, please also talk to me and Tom. Thank you.
We have actually, there's an entrepreneur who's here in the vault who I've admired for a while. I'm going to just turn it over, right? Because you're going to talk a little bit about your platform.
Yes, thank you, Tom. So Tom is our board of advisor, and then the topic is about entrepreneurship. So actually, I started my first business. I don't really call it actually business, but
I started my first thing when I was 13. I was write books, comic books, and then copy it and rent to the different people in the school. And then I never made any money out of it, so that's why I don't really call it a business. But my first business, actual business, was starting from 18 in China and Japan. I grew up in both China and Japan. So, and then I sold the first house worth 4 million US dollar when I was 20. But the thing is, I learned a lot of lesson is what do you really want to do? Having a plan is not enough. It's also you actually have to put the effort to do it, right? So, do you have the slides? Sorry. So actually, right now I'm starting my fifth company. After my previous company, I was in charge of one of their branch in Japan, went 5 billion IPO in Hong Kong. So to create this company, basically for company to retain their employee, just the idea I've been thinking for 4 years. And before that, actually, I had another idea to play games on Facebook with HTML5 technology. But the thing is, I didn't do anything, and my friend took my idea, raised 22 million US dollar. So after that, I decided I need to make this happen, and I started to raise fund last year, and then basically I talked to 1,000 people and then follow up with 300 of them. 10 of them funded us, including one of the only female VCs in Japan. Because in Japan, the situation is even worse than China. The women barely get hired to work. So basically, our platform is for mentorship matching based on personality and experience within the organization and across industry. The most thing is it's just not to meet people, but also with a project management tool to say after you meet this person, what next? You can have a coffee, but then the thing is, when will you have a deadline to finish the product? When we have the deadline to actually make things into work. So we will be able to have this product management tool built in this mentorship platform. So after you can meet people at the Guild, but then you can move your mentors on our platform, and then to actually manage the program between the two people. And then, sorry, too fast. We have another thing called team fact finders, mainly for company, to actually identify the problems in the company, and then another company can have a dashboard to see their retention rate and everything. So yeah, I was just saying that you can try the mentorship part, and then the most thing I want to talk about is basically starting to do the things when you have an idea and actually put everything into action and set deadline to each of the milestones. It's very important. Thank you. Yumi, my name is Yumi Alisa Kimura. You can add me on Facebook or maybe LinkedIn.
All right, guys. Just a heartfelt thank you for coming and for sitting for about an hour and two, listening to our panel. And really, really thankful that you can be here. And I do want to connect with each and every one of you personally. So I wish I can give you time to do a round of self-intro if possible, but I guess everybody has their priority and life going. So